for fun. Eddie, who's your favorite fighter?
Yeah.
My favorite fighter right now, I think it's Kamaru Usman.
Really?
Nice.
Yeah,
Nice.
yeah.
You could have told us that when we were talking about
Yeah,
it.
anyway. Yeah.
I think it's him, actually. I mean, he does have a good stand-up. He does have a good ground game and stuff, so he can dominate you with the wrestling. And he is using it at will, so I think that makes a... And I also listened to the podcast with Joe Rogan and stuff, so he sounds like a decent guy, too.
Yeah,
You know?
yeah. I listened to. He's been on there twice. I listened to both of those too, and I thought the same thing. I know people give him shit about not being like, maybe he's not a good trash talker, or maybe he's not going to catch the eyes of everyone. Especially a lot of people don't necessarily like the grappling style, which is not the case for us, but for a lot of people it is. But I listened on the Joe Rogan show. I was like, he just seems like a guy with a really big heart and real driven. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was just real, like emotionally involved in everything.
Sociable guy, basically, right? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the guy would basically tear up talking about how hard he worked to get here. You know what I mean? Like, you gotta appreciate that in someone for sure.
Sure.
So.
What do you guys pick?
What do you guys pick? Well, my favorite all time is Michael Bisping, but I think I love Michael Bisping. There's not even a second guess. I think I've somehow brought up Michael Bisping on every episode of this podcast.
Yeah, seriously. Maybe I'll get on. Maybe I'll know you're a big fan.
In one way or another, intentional or not, somehow maybe we're talking about a story. I'm like, well, like they did with Michael Bisping, I'll somehow find a way to bring him up. But currently,
why is that? The reason, Paige?
I just think he's a dog, man. I think, and then I'm reading his book, and then I listen to his podcast, and he's a guy who he grew up fighting when you're not supposed to. You know what I mean? He grew up getting in trouble, because he didn't take shit. If you said something sideways to him, it's not like it is today where everyone's so sensitive. You said something sideways.
You talked this through, huh? Yeah,
you said something. If you said something sideways to Michael Bisping and on the streets of Clitheroe, England, he's probably going to smack you upside your head for it. And probably, yeah, it's just a guy who didn't. A lot like the Diaz guys are known for. He was a guy growing up. He just didn't take shit, and he got in a lot of fights. He went to prison because some guys beat up his. I'm telling his story, I guess, but some guys beat up his friend at a club, and then they went outside and he head kicked some dude, knocked him out, and ended up going to jail for it. And then the fact that he was in the game, he was in the UFC so long, and he was older, and he'd win one, lose one, win one, lose one, and he was always considered the gatekeeper. Like, he's the gatekeeper, he's good, but he'll never be champion. Now he's getting older, he's 36, he's 37. He just, it may be time to hang it up, and then he comes out and wins the belt, and then defends it once, and avenges an old loss that he had against Dan Henderson. I think his UFC story is the coolest, in my opinion. I think his story of being a street fighter who didn't have a job, he had a kid, a wife, the woman he's still with, and times were tough, paycheck to paycheck, welfare, all this stuff. And he said, I'm only really good at beating the shit out of people in bars. and then he takes that, and then he goes through a lot of adversity. Never lost until his last two in the UFC. Never lost 2 fights in a row his whole career. Every time he lost, never. Every time he lost, he won his next one. He's never lost 2 straight. Still considered the gatekeeper. And every time you watch all his old fights, every time he says, I still believe I have what it takes to be the champion. And everyone wrote him off. And then he comes back on 10 days' notice or whatever, knocks out Luke Rockhold, another avenged loss, the guy that beat him before, and then defends the belt. I just think his UFC story is the coolest. I think he's a dog. And, yeah, so that's why. It's not even a question for me. But current fighters, Cowboy Cerrone. It's hard not to like him. He's just so likable. He's just a dude's dude. You know what I mean? Just a dude's dude. So, Alex, go ahead.
Yeah, my favorite fight. I'm a John Jones fan, just from when I was.
Okay.
Yeah. So for me, John Jones, I think John Jones when I was, first becoming a UFC fan and kind of just seeing him just destroy people at 23 years old was just cool. And I think John Jones is a good guy that just makes bad decisions. I feel for the guy. I think he tries and he fucks up,
When fame hits you that early, it's hard.
Yeah,
it's hard.
I think he was one of those people, yeah, where like he had a huge sponsorship with Nike. Like people forget about that, is when he signed with Nike, he was like 24 years old, and he was he was the face of the UFC at that time. And like, I mean, that's a lot of pressure for a guy. So, I mean, he makes some mistakes, but I think he tries to learn from it. And I think he's a nice guy when you listen to him on podcasts. He seems like a pretty like down to earth, humble guy.
Yeah.
And then he's just exciting to watch. So